Again, welcome. We'll go ahead and get started. ACTE is so excited to be partnering with ASCA today to bring you this webinar on counseling and career development in a time of uncertainty. I don't know if you're like me, but right now I'm really hungry for connection through webinars like this, as well as just learning best practices around how do we do this work with our students and families in a virtual environment. So my name is Nicole Cobb. I'm the Vice President of the Counseling and Career Development Division for ACTE. I love seeing all these familiar names and faces pop up. I know everyone's really busy, but thank you for joining us today. We have a really great panel put together for you where I know we're all going to learn a lot. The webinar is being recorded, so afterwards we'll make sure that this link gets sent out, and you're welcome to share the link with any colleagues or friends you have. If you have questions as we're going through, please feel free to put those in the chat box. If we don't have time to get to questions at the end, I'll be getting a PDF of all of those questions, and I'll work with our panelists to answer them. And when we share the link, we'll also answer the questions and share any resources you may hear about today. So I encourage you to interact through the chat box. I'll let our panelists introduce themselves to you, and I'd love to start with Jill Cook from ASCA.
Hi, thanks, Nicole, and hello, everybody. My name's Jill Cook. I'm the Assistant Director of the American School Counselor Association, and we are so pleased to partner with ACT today to provide this learning development opportunity for you. ASCA and ACTE, we work very closely together throughout the year on a normal case basis, but given, as Nicole was saying, this time when we're really all just really hungry for connections and interactions, but also information, I really welcome this opportunity to share with you these phenomenal speakers who are doing this work every day. So thanks, Nicole, thanks, ACTE. Looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Julie Hill, can we move to you next?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and just welcome to everybody. And thank you so much for taking a few minutes out to have this great conversation with us. My name is Julie Hill, and I am a school counselor at Western Boone Junior Senior High, and we are a rural junior senior high in Indiana.
Great, thank you. Laura?
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here and talk with you all today. I'm Laura Ross, and I am the counselor, one of the counselors at Five Forks Middle School in Lawrenceville, Georgia. We are just right outside of Atlanta, so we're in the Atlanta metro area, and I work with a diverse group of students, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and I'm excited to share with you all today.
And Julia?
Hi, everybody. So great. Echoing what Laura and Julie had said, it's exciting to be a part of this conversation. Yes, I am the school counselor at Dan Mills Elementary. We are located in East Nashville in Tennessee. We are a very diverse populated school, and I'm also the lead consultant for Hogue Consulting. So I'm excited to be here.
Great, thank you, Julia. So I'll jump right into our first question, and I'll start with you, Julie. Given the extremely challenging times we're in, what do you feel is most important for school counselors and our career development specialists to be doing right now immediately for students and families?
Right now, it is all about connections. So our brains just thrive on those connections. We're wired to be social beings. So the social distancing is creating some real challenges for a lot of our students. I read an article a couple days ago that the next pandemic could be mental health. So I feel like the most important thing we can do for our kids and our families is to just help them feel okay. And for those students that maybe don't have a very positive home life, helping to find ways to individually support them and keep them connected in this challenging time.
Great. Laura, what would you add?
Definitely connections is first and foremost with our students and families, and trying to connect with them in a variety of ways. And I've found with on top of that, also just resources and making sure they're connected to resources in the community, whether it's for food or internet, resources that we may have at school for them, even counseling that they would do outside of school. Some are doing some telehealth, mental health counseling, so connecting them with that. But I found with my students in connecting with them that the more kind of normal-ish things I can do with them, the better that they have felt. So the more, I'm doing some of my after-school clubs still just virtually, and that's helping them kind of, feel a little bit better and connected in a space that they normally would be in every week anyway.
Great. And Julia, how about you?
So again, echoing Laura and Julie around the idea of connection is key. And for little people, for the K-4 age range, which is what I'm focused on at our school, really also supporting the families to be able to connect to their littles. A lot of our little people have littler people in their homes. And so helping parents know that it's okay to not be okay. A lot of the things that we echo and reiterate within the school, making sure that parents, that we have that capacity to do one-on-one typically with kids, making sure parents know that they can articulate that with kids and giving them resources to do so. And just like, I think Laura spoke to this too, this idea of understanding what the individual needs is really important, the individual needs of each family. So finding a way to gather that data and trying to target individually instead of too many mass emails, because I know there's a lot of feelings of being overwhelmed right now. So doing what we can to send important general emails and communicate, and then also individualizing those communications.
So Julia, following up on that thought, as you're connecting with your students and families, what are their main issues or concerns right
now? I would suspect this is pretty much countrywide, and if not worldwide, but anxiety continues to be extremely prevalent in the homes, even so our unique population, we have, as I said before, we have a lot of families that are working class families that have lost jobs. We have a lot of families that are also freelance artists and musicians here in Nashville that are out of work. So teaching families and giving them resources around anxiety has been really important, and just understanding that that is a real place and that it's a contagious emotion, right? So we know that it's rarely a function of individuals, it's usually of groups. And so that's something that we're seeing plaguing. And so what I'm really working to do with our principal is making sure everybody understands some of the nuances of anxiety, just as a general. So we've been talking about that in faculty meetings about how it shows up and how we move through anxiety so that they can disseminate that towards parents and kiddos as well.
Great. And Jill, from the ASCA standpoint, I know you all have been providing a lot of training and webinars and resources. What are you all seeing as the greatest concerns and questions and issues right now?
So from school counselors, what we heard early on was really questioning and wanting to understand the ethical considerations about doing this work virtually. As school counselors, certainly that code of ethics and really wanting to preserve the integrity of that relationship with the student that we have when we're able to meet with them one-on-one, face-to-face. So what does that look like in a virtual setting? So we've had lots of conversations, provided webinars on what confidentiality may look like virtually. Do you have to have informed consent? And really the message on all of these things from us has been, these aren't decisions you need to make in isolation as school counselors. This really has to be a conversation with your principal, with your administrative team at school, and with your school district, because ultimately, you have to have that collective message about how you're doing this work. So I know early on school counselors were really like, we have to get out there and support these kiddos. So some of it was really just telling them to take a breath and let's just think through this, and we're going to make sure we as ASCA, you as ACTE, we can provide you what you need.
Right. Yes. So Laura, you mentioned that you've been doing some work already with keeping your after school clubs up and going. What are some other ways that you're finding to engage with your students and family in the new environment?
So we are we are trying every way that we even hear about because some students and families respond to one thing and others respond to another. We're very privileged in our district to already have had a digital learning platform that we have used when we have inclement weather days. So our families and our students, our teachers, all are used to that. So, but if we didn't have that, it would, we would definitely be using, and still some of ours are linking to Google Classrooms and that type of thing. So as far as counseling goes, we are using Google Classrooms to reach out to our clubs. We are using our virtual platform for our whole school, and getting information out to them, creating videos for them. That's where we post a lot of our school events that we're still doing, just virtually, but also calling families. We've set up Google Voice numbers just to protect our own privacy with our phone numbers, but so we can call, emailing, setting up video conferencing through Zoom or through Google Meets, and any kind of tech tool that we can use when we're putting something out for students that they can respond and interact a little bit, such as Padlet or Flipgrid, so that they can make videos and respond. So there is some engagement with them and interaction with them. So every time we hear something, we try it out. We may try a little lunch bunch with counselors in the middle of the week too for check-ins. So putting that out there for students to join us. So any way that we can find that will connect, and some respond to phone calls better than emails, to video conferencing. So we just do different things for all of our students.
Great. And Julie, what is it looking like for you at the high school level?
Well, I love that piece that went around on social media not too long ago about educators just Apollo 13 in the whole problem, because it is. It's a combination of Apollo 13 and MacGyver, I think. And we're building quality instruction out of the spring out of a pen or whatever it happens to be. I think for us, one of the challenges in being a rural district is we do have the advantage of being one-to-one, but that means they have a device. That doesn't necessarily mean they have quality internet. And so we're having to help them track down hotspots. In some areas of our district, families couldn't get internet if they wanted it, simply because it's not even available. So even the free resources that are out there are not an option. So some districts in our area have outfitted school buses with Wi-Fi, and they're driving their bus routes, and they're parking the bus long enough for the kids to be able to download their assignments. Our teachers have been amazing, finding creative ways to attack their instruction. We're putting together weekly meal boxes, and to say that in our area, our staff has been super creative. We are just an example of what is happening all over the country.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and so as you're talking about access and equity, I see Michael's question in the chat box about how are we all addressing students with special needs. So I'll open that up to any panelist that has something to share. If you just wave at me, any of you can go first. Yeah, Julie, and then hi Shelley. Okay, yeah.
So there are great things going on, but our special ed department specifically is opening up. The staff is rotating hours when they have office hours, so students are able to log in at any point. The staff obviously is working very closely with the classroom teachers so that they can track either the students who are getting lost in the shuffle or whatever those individual needs are. So I would I can't say enough about the work of our special ed staff and really everybody who's working to creatively meet those needs.
Great. And Shelley, welcome. If you haven't met Shelley Tome, she's on our division's policy committee and our lead for equity and diversity. I know you just answered in the chat box, but will you share with everyone what you're doing in your district?
Sure. Thanks, Nicole. Hi, guys. Great to see you. In our district, we're a career technical education district, so we actually don't have a special education team. So our counselors become that special education team for all of our students that we share with all the member districts that come to us. So really, our teams have had to kind of work ahead of the curve as much as possible to make sure that we met with all of our instructional staff and made sure that they were aware in this time of uncertainty that all those accommodations needed to continue on, even in remote learning, have provided them tip sheets as to how accommodations that they had in the classroom might look in a remote way, so that they have a nice little chart to see how to implement that, reminding them to build it into their lesson plans. We've also discussed with them, just all those little hurdles that they anticipated and how we might work through that, making sure our staff is accessible with office hours and always beyond that. All of us are staff for teachers and counselors. And then also tracking all of our students with accommodations and modifications, making sure our teachers, if they hadn't been able to gather all of their accommodation pages before they left, that we're providing that to them and giving them a list of all of their students so that when they build their lesson plans, all of those things are being included. And then we're doing weekly follow-ups as well to see if any of the kids aren't doing as well, if they're dropping off, if there's any concerns, we're starting to check in on that. And then there might be kids that maybe aren't identified as special education or 504 students that now start to demonstrate some barriers now that we have a different way of learning. So we're making sure to keep an eye on them for any new barriers we didn't expect as well. One of the anticipated barriers was, some of you have mentioned as well, is the internet and computers. And so we have actually, as a staff, reached out to every single student in our district. There's only 2 kids unaccounted for out of our entire district in a week and a half of reaching out, and made sure everyone had computers. If they didn't, we've checked them out. So we've issued about 70 computers in the last week to families, making sure they have hotspots and giving them lists of community resources for the free internet and things of that nature, as well as the food boxes and everything else that goes with that to support them during this time. So lots of great things, but much more to be done, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Shelley, maybe you could share some of those templates that you created to help track, and we can share that with everybody after the webinar.
Absolutely. I'll email those to you later for the distribution.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jill, Laura, Julia, anything to add on that question?
No, I think that considering, of course, the equity piece is number one and paramount right now for school counselors, just the lens and the training we have and understanding of what that needs to look like. And again, the skills that we've built within a comprehensive school counseling programs, right? Being ASCA aligned, those skills transferred to these, like Julie was saying, the Apollo 13 moment we're finding ourselves in. How do we collect that data to find? But I will say, Shelley, I'm just going to be forthcoming and be vulnerable when I hear you share all that your district was able to do and mobilize really quickly. I start to feel, and I think that this is something that's important to recognize for counselors, I start to feel overwhelmed and maybe even some touches of not enough, because we have so many kids in our district. We have very little capacity we definitely don't have technology one-to-one. We are barely able to get our juniors and seniors technology at this point to be able to continue on in their classes. We are still mobilizing food. And I was sharing with some folks before that I just was able to ensure that all of my families have food for the weekend. And it's the first time we've been able to do that. So equity looks different based on where you are in those populations, and just making sure that we individualize those things. And just, it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, good.
But those tools are amazing.
Yeah. I think we're all learning and just trying to figure this out together, and it's one breath, one moment at a time right now. So, with ASCA and ACTE, one of the huge components we focus on is career development. So I'm really interested in hearing Are you able in these times to do anything around career development, post-secondary planning, or for the moment has that been put on hold? Laura, what's that looking like at the middle school level?
So it's interesting because typically if we were in the building, our March, April, May, really April, May gets so filled with testing and end of the year activities that we actually do so much in the classrooms before then. We're typically done before April. But this actually has allowed us a little bit of a window to do more. Because there isn't testing happening. And so there's a couple of things. One, for sure, we're doing some post-secondary awareness in the middle school. Every year we do a Reach Higher Week, and we're doing it virtually this year. And so we do a variety of activities. We're just figuring out how to put it on a virtual platform. Our students typically have things all around the school, college pennants and posters where they can scan a QR code and find out information about that school, and fill out fact-finding sheets and enter into a grand prize drawing. We're still going to do it. We're going to just post them virtually. We're going to do a e-gift card for our grand prize drawing. We also do a Reach Higher word wall because we want our middle schoolers to hear the language around high school and post-secondary, so they start to be familiar with that. Everything as simple as a GPA all the way to, what is FAFSA and starting to hear that. And typically we do Reach Higher Lingo Bingo, and everybody gets a bingo card, but and we do videos and announcements. We're still going to do those videos and announcements, but we're finding some different tools online. There's a website, puzzle.org, which is P-U-Z-Z-E-L, but it allows you to create some different like word searches or crosswords that students can do online, so they don't have to print anything out to do it. So that's one of the ways we're going to get them to participate and kind of play and learn some of that, post-secondary language. And just a few other things. We are going to work with our media specialists a little bit. We usually do a display with the biographies in the media center that show where folks who we have biographies on, where they went to school, what they majored in. So we're going to work with her a little bit and see what she can come up with on her website for that. And then have all of our teachers on their Google Classrooms or platforms that they're using still do a college t-shirt day. They usually have something outside of their classroom doors about my college journey, where they answer some sentence stems, why I went to college, what was the best thing, what was the hardest thing. So we're going to ask them to do a video instead, and put it on their virtual platform. So when students go to all of those classes during the week, virtually they'll see that post-secondary kind of promotion there for them. And one of the things that we're starting to think about, our teachers now on Fridays really do kind of a remediation, enrichment kind of time, not any new assignment. And so we were going to work with some of the teachers and see if they would like help with some of their enrichment activities and really tie in careers into what they are learning in those classes. So I know our sixth grade science is starting to talk about constellations and different things like that, and just ask how we can partner with them and help them come up with enrichment activities, and then it kind of helps us because we can link it to different careers and stuff and really get that career education out there for them too.
Great. You've gotten so creative. It's exciting. It makes me want to be at your school getting to do these activities. Julie, what's it looking like at the high school?
So I think, a lot of what Laura said, we're addressing career development using a lot of the different online platforms. But I think the most important part is really determining some dedicated instructional time to meet that need in order for it to be effective. While students are feeling overwhelmed right now, it can't just be one more thing. So, when students are in school on a typical day, we can't just put a resource out there without being intentional about guiding them through it. So really working to see how it fits into the school's overall instructional plan while students are learning remotely. So in some cases, that's going to be putting out a dedicated webinar, a video, and in some cases, it's going to be working with your staff a little bit more organically to tie it into the instruction that's already happening into the classroom.
Yeah, great. I just saw that Gibby Gibbons, our Division Vice President of Elect, is on here. And Gibby, I've been following your videos for weeks that you're doing with students, and they're phenomenal. Can you share with the group a little bit about what you're doing?
Yeah, I've been, I like to create cartoon videos, I guess you could say. First one I did was just helping kids create a schedule, like really, really basic things of continue to eat lunch at the same time each day, because school is all about a schedule. And I had kids who were very type A personality who couldn't get anything done because they didn't have a schedule. So just giving them simple things like that to do. But as far as the career stuff, I've got 2 that I'm working on this week. One of them, we use the platform Major Clarity. And so I'm putting together a cartoon video of how to walking students through all the steps for them to get into that and use that. The other thing I'm doing is in my district, I go out every year and talk to all 16 elementary schools and talk to all the 5th graders about how they want to change the world. And it's how I get them started thinking about CTE in particular when they're in 5th grade, before they even get to the middle school level. So again, I'm doing a cartoon video, all career-based, to get out to all of our elementary schools, because it's usually something I do in the spring. So of the 16 schools, I'd only been at 5. So I'm getting that out. And actually, a lot of the counselors are going to send that to their 3 through 5 and get them all thinking about it. So I do the video thing.
Great. We'll send out some links to your videos in a follow-up too.
I run just one more quick thing by you.
Yeah.
I work at a CTE center for the most part. I miss my cosmetology students immensely. So work-based learning is super important, right? So the work-based learning that we're doing with them, the third-year cosmetology students have to write step-by-step instructions of how I can cut my own hair. Your cosmetology students are writing instructions on how to make it purple. So we're trying to do what we can to get them involved in that.
I love it. Hands-on learning at its best, right? I'm not brave enough to cut my own hair yet. I feel like that could be a disaster. I'm seeing Robert reminding us about Maslow's hierarchy of needs should really be what it is that guides us. And Julia, I know that this is in the forefront of your mind, not just during a pandemic, but year-round. And I've also been following you and some of the mindfulness work you're taking virtually. Could you share that with the group?
Sure, yes. Absolutely, the forefront of what we're doing at our school is starting with that basic, making sure we have food, water, shelter, feeling safe. And through that, of course, wanting to give resources, really low-hanging fruit, without having to go digging, without overwhelming with emails, as I said before. So I created a YouTube channel of, this is something, we are a mindful school. We've implemented mindfulness, have been working with folks to really guide how we roll that out school-wide and systemically. And so we have 5-minute morning mindful moments that we start our days with. So I've just created a YouTube channel that are week by week, walking through or going through a whole week. They're 5 minutes each day, so that kiddos can start their day the same way we would at school. So trying to create that continuity. I've heard some other people share that as well, that importance of a schedule. And that's something that our population is really used to. And so we really wanted to create that access to that. And I would be remiss if I wouldn't add also just talking about considering keeping that at the forefront, right? Maslow's hierarchy, and then also the pause that's necessary. The thinking of career is still important for elementary. We probably won't be going back in Tennessee. We should know today. I got word that we should have that announcement today. But we can still start to weave it in, as Julie said, even at the elementary tier. One of the things we really work on are the interpersonal skills. And we can't do that together, like we would normally practice, we used the Amazing Shake from the Ron Clark Academy. And we have, so we do a contest every year at the end of the year for how to have handshakes, and we bring outside folks in, but it is something they can practice through FaceTime with their families. It's something where they can practice keeping eye contact. And so we're building that in 4th and 3rd grade. Once we are sure everybody's safe, for teachers to be practicing with them through Zoom and things like that.
Great, yes. And you bring up an interesting point, Jill. I'll toss this one to you. Many states and districts are finding out in the coming days that we may not be going back for who knows how long.
Mm-hmm.
So what advice do you have for everyone if this continues to linger on? What's phase 2? What are some best practices ASCA has found across the country should this continue?
So I think we could probably safely assume that the majority of us will not go back to school this year. There are many states that have already made those announcements. So I know some of the national education groups we work with, we are starting to really look toward what would going back to school look like. And what we have collectively experienced, how that will come to school when we are all back together in a brick and mortar setting. So I was on a call yesterday, and we were really talking about it around trauma and ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And the fact is, you know, this is a very traumatic event for lots of reasons. And as we've talked about, it impacts students and families differently depending on situations. But the fact is, we as teachers, as school counselors, as caregivers are actually experiencing trauma too. As a result of this. So what is it we need to be thinking about as we think about next phase in terms of how we support not only students and families, but our school staff as we come back together? And maybe not even as we come back together in person, but as we're experiencing it now. I think one of the things we need to think about is how we support staff now during this time. As school counselors, I know a lot of you did that for teachers and other staff members in person. I'm sure they would come by your office. Hey, can I just vent for a minute? So I think working with your principal to find a way to check in with staff is something important we need to think about now and as we move ahead.
Excellent point. So Julie, Laura, Julia, do any of you have best practices on how to stay connected to your faculty and staff during this time?
Well, I've already, I've begun an educator resilience training with my staff, which I think a lot of them are starting to draw on this time. I also have implemented office hours just for my staff. To just kind of have those moments of, you know, just need to check in. We're also looking at, you know, Teacher Appreciation Week typically falls in this time. So how do we, again, just show a little bit of extra TLC to our staff? So we're looking at like staff spirit weeks, the same we do with our kids, you know, show up with your favorite coffee mug this morning. And those sorts of things are really important right now.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Laura, what about you?
So our teachers are still having their professional learning communities just through Zoom, and so counselors kind of have trying to divide and conquer and jump in on all of those. So we have an opportunity to talk to each of our groups as they're planning, but of course as they're worried about certain students or see what they need from us in ways that we can help and support the work that they're doing online as well. So we've asked our administrators, we don't care how many we get, just send us all the Zoom links and we'll rotate and jump in on those. I did 3 today and just was able to talk with staff and see what was going on. So I think that's been really important for us.
Right. And Julia, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so as Jill said, and I'm glad she brought up the T word, right? This is a collective trauma. And so when we're talking about that with staff, I think number one is working with leadership in your building to establish a norm. As much as you can advocate for that, helping them understand what that is, how that can sit in the body, how that can sit for folks, because we have to be able to be the calm, right, for the chaos. And that takes work. And that also takes leadership looking at us and saying, I see you with kids at home. Yeah, I have 2 little kids out here running around with the dog, so I'm sorry if you hear that. And we're all working to navigate this together and making sure that the admin and the team are collected and united in setting that norm of a collective breath when you need it, and advocating for the space that they need. And so that's been remarkably important for myself to just hear from leadership that it's okay, and continuing to reach out to me and to other support staff as they need.
Great. I'm looking in the chat box and I see a great question asking about, does anyone know if they're still offering virtual ways for industry certifications? Our high school counselors, Shelley, Gibby, Julie, do you have any input on, or have you heard of anything about certification exams, anything like that?
We're very fortunate in our district that we have an amazing career services team. So as soon as it looked like we were going to start to move towards shutdown, at least temporarily, started applying for waivers with the industry certification departments to see what kind of waivers we can have for some of the in-person hours, how we can still achieve it with virtual hours. And we're working through that. So our chart on that looks different, probably from 8 in the morning to 8 at night every day. And I can't say that I know exactly where we are on all those, but with, what do we have, 28 different programs and multiple certifications going, they're positively working on that and finding ways to be able to move forward. And in Arizona, it's a little bit different, I'm sure, than every state, but we are trying to see if at the end of this month, we're able to bring back kids in small sessions to work on some of those hands-on things in order to meet requirements for certifications. But it's still an ever-evolving process. I'd love to hear what other people have come up with.
I know that, like our cosmetology, our 3rd-year students, they have to have so many hours to be able to test, and that number is being adjusted not only, I think, for this year, but also for the next couple of years, because it's a cumulative over 3 years. So it's not, the lack of hours isn't only going to affect this year's students testing, it's going to affect the next 2 years also. One of the things I've done in Virginia is having a certification is one of the graduation requirements. They've waived that for seniors. So if we had seniors who were on track to graduate, who for whatever reason hadn't gotten their CTE certification yet, that's been waived. They can still graduate without that.
Great. I just saw that Karen raised her hand. Karen, I know you just left a certification meeting. What did you find out?
I'm in North Carolina, and the NCCER, I actually had to leave it early because it went for 2 hours, but they're going to be doing that training again. And right now, our seniors can take certification exams up until June 18th. So they have given us a cutoff time for seniors that can do certification exams at that time. And they said that I think underclassmen can do it through August. If not, they'll go into next year for them. But they gave this very intense training that anybody can go back into. It's about 2 hours or more of testing and doing it online, the proctoring, because it's always an ethical issue. You know, it's an issue of, how do you do that? How does that work? And so one of the things they kept driving was to keep your cameras on, to make sure the students' cameras are on. You know, they just went line by line upon what that looks like.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. That's a training I definitely need to make time for. Julie, do you have anything to add?
I'd say pretty similar to what the others. I think it really varies from state to state. Indiana did what Virginia did in terms of eliminating that as a graduation requirement for those students. And I think we're all just trying to be optimistic right now, not knowing how long this is going to be, and maybe thinking we can just delay everything by a couple of months and still give students those opportunities without having to be completely reinventing the wheel in certifications.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing in the chat box, Katie Meehan has something to add.
Sure. So I'm with Westmec, so out in Arizona. Our
career services team has reached out to many of the different vendors, and we are getting day-to-day updates from all of the different vendors that are out there. Many are offering live remote proctoring. With the live remote proctoring, there are some additional requirements technology-wise for students, so that is something to be aware of. Some of the vendors are also charging a fee for that, so that's another thing to be aware of when looking at the live remote proctoring. Or we've had vendors who say you can live remote proctor, but only one student at a time. So that's going to be difficult when it's a class of 48. Other things we've had, like Gibby, we've had vendors that have said instead of having 160 extern hours, the student can qualify after having 160 hours of work experience. So if they had typically done that after school, then we'd be able to substitute that in. And we also had one vendor who was willing to substitute a teacher sign off of skills shown in the lab over having the students complete the full externship.
Great. Thank you for sharing all of that. So helpful. I was just seeing something in the chat. Shelly, who did you send me has some really great elementary career packets they're doing?
We're very fortunate that Marilyn Babiar, Director of Student Services, is on the call, and our recruiting team did amazing stuff to get resources out to elementaries for career exploration. Marilyn?
So again, I'm Marilyn from West Mech. So you're talking with Shelly and Katie. So we don't mean to take over your Zoom meeting here, but we are proud of our technical district out here in Arizona. And we have this wonderful group of recruiters, and the recruiters work with our elementaries, and they have created an elementary packet using all those great things like the lingo bingo and word searches. And we sent that out to all of our elementary schools and to all of our local directors. And we even sent it out to our own instructors, because even though it was made for 6th through 8th grade, we figured some of our kids might really like to look at a great word search just about our programs as well. So we just wanted to keep career development in the minds of students at all levels. And so we just did something fun like that for them.
Great. And I'm seeing requests in the chat box. Would you share those packets? So if you're willing to do that, Shelly, maybe you can take the lead to get those resources together and shoot them my way, and we'll get them out. And speaking of resources, Jill, I know ASCA is really curating lots and lots of information right now. Could you tell the group a little bit about what you're doing and where they can find information on the website?
Absolutely. If you go to schoolcounselor.org, we have a banner at the top of the page that links to the resources we've compiled from regarding responding to this virtual learning environment. So several things specifically we've done. One is there is an FAQ, and these were, this is the packet that was developed based on the questions we got from school counselors all over the country. So everything from, do you record your sessions? What if we're being asked to record our sessions? What about confidentiality? What about informed consent? So if you have a particular situation, you can go to that FAQ and see if it's there. We also have a PDF about what virtual school counseling should look like. And that's been helpful for school counselors as they've worked with administrators about how they establish this program virtually. And then we've done some online webinars that are available. One from this great great school in Pennsylvania. It's a virtual school. And so we're actually learning a lot from those virtual schools that do this all the time about how they do this work. So there's a great webinar from that school. And then what we're working on right now is really curating lesson plans. So we've got some great folks, including Laura, who is on this Zoom meeting with us, who are working on it at the different levels. So we already have an elementary online packet of lessons that could be implemented virtually. Laura's working on middle school, and we have somebody working on high school. And these are meant to not be just static documents, but we're going to edit them and revise and add to as we get more information. So that's what we've heard is really a great need right now. And many of the things you've talked about today, the sharing you've done, those are great things that I think we could add to this. But really, school counselors are wanting to know what this looks like in reality, in a lesson, in a virtual platform with a student. How do you support this academic, career, and social emotional development?
Excellent, thank you. And I'll be sure to put that link in what we send out. So Julie, do you see any silver linings in the midst of all of this?
I mean, there are silver linings in everything if we can kind of look for that perspective. Of course, we're all pleased to see that teachers can teach and students can learn without as much standardized testing as we're used to. I imagine there are a lot of families that are making the most of this opportunity to connect really and truly as a family in a different way. But I also think it really gives us the chance to teach problem solving, flexibility, and compassion, and helping our students think about how they can reach outside of themselves and look at the greater good.
Great. Julia, what about you? What are the silver linings?
Well, one for sure is that this, as I said earlier, that skill set, the data-driven practices help in crisis even more than I mean, not that I didn't expect, but have been instrumental in us really addressing these needs. We created a Google survey, and I was able to collect data, all practices as a school counselor that I've always done. I was able to apply them really quickly. So a silver lining for me is just knowing no matter if I have that direct contact with students and families or not, I'm able to be data driven in the way I approach supporting my families and staff. Second, of course, is any time that I think so much of what we advocate for, especially when you do trauma-informed work, is how to create a pause and a space in between a catalyst and a reaction. And so that practice that we're really, as a worldwide, taking a collective pause, and what that could do, the byproducts of that what could that be for families? What will it be like when they are forced to sit and connect to themselves and go inward instead of numbing and moving and doing all the things that we feel like we have to do? So watching our families start to embark and embrace some of that stillness, that is stuff that we've been advocating for quite a while. It's exciting to see.
Absolutely. And Laura, I'll ask you the same question. What are the silver linings in your world?
You know, some things that I've seen, especially in our school community, is just the really strength of our community and everybody coming together. Immediately, we had families wanting to help other families who needed help. We have teachers supporting teachers, and you know, some who are more tech savvy than the others, and everybody really supporting each other and figuring out ways to, you know, cope with and share resources and cope with what's going on right now. And the other thing that I've seen is, you know, we're all learning a little bit more technology and learning some new things that we can still use later on as well. So it gives us that time to get creative and find some of those tech tools that can help us connect with and teach our students.
Yeah, definitely. So Julia, a little earlier in the webinar, I want to thank you for being vulnerable, and you talked about being a little bit overwhelmed, which I think every one of us can relate to right now,
Sure.
which just brings to mind how important for all of us in times of crisis or in the everyday that we find ways to find balance and to do self-care. So I'm just curious, what are you doing right now for self-care, or do you have any advice on self-care for our group?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the practices I really work on at school is with my students is naming the feeling, and I always try to live anything that I encouraged others to practice. So you just saw me experiencing that here. Just naming that feeling as I'm going through my day, giving a name to what's rising inside. And my sons will say it, and my husband laughs. I will mention, my feeling word is stressed, or my feeling word is afraid, and naming it. And then from there, using a coping skill that might help. And then I always like to advocate starting the day balance will help create a day of balance. So I start my mornings very slowly. no matter how fast I might have to move to address student needs or family needs or things within my home, I'm able to I start earlier and I start slower with a meditation, which is really important for me. And then also incorporating some movement to the both to start my day so that I'm able to do all that I can to create balance throughout
Great.
the day.
Yeah, thank you. Julie, what about you? How are you finding time for you during this busy, busy time?
Well, I'm trying really hard just to stay regulated, because I know as an adult, when I'm working with my students, my level of regulation is going to translate very closely to their level of regulation. So part of that is organization and, you know, crossing things off the to-do list that, you know, the to-do list that's been around forever. So, you know, I have this little extra time at home now. So, you know, being able to get some of those to-dos done. Some of it is even just the small things like the space that I'm living in now 24 hours a day, like getting that organization and the decluttering of, you know, making it look more like my office than my home. And then, you know, just the other big part is finding that that fresh air. So the occasional webinar that happens out in the backyard, I can listen there while I'm getting some fresh air and sunshine, going out, taking a walk after the end of the day. And then for me, just really finding ways to give back, because I think that really in me fosters an attitude of resilience and meaning in a time when we all feel a little bit hopeless.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura, what are you doing to take care of you?
So I can quickly just become all school counselor and stay in this space. So I have to make sure that I had, some kind of routine that I start the day off with, but also end the day with, and to keep those hours and walk away from the laptop and let it be, because I could sit there because I'm, in the same room or the same home, and I could easily sit there and keep working. And so making sure that I do that. I also live alone besides all the animals that I have. So it's important for me to FaceTime or talk on the phone with family and friends. My brother has set up some sort of online Uno that we're doing with each other tonight to play a game. So anything where I'm connecting with other people as well, because that's what's going to keep me energized and being able to support my students.
Great. As we come to the end of our hour together, I'm going to ask each of the panelists, starting with you, Jill, if you have any last words of advice for our career development professionals and counselors as they move forward this afternoon and tomorrow to continue working with students and families as this goes on. So, Jill.
So I don't know if I have advice, but what I do have is just deep and eternal gratitude for the work you're doing. Listening to you all share today, and not just the panelists, but everybody who chimed in, it gives me hope. And hearing how the work that you're doing, it's about the students and about these families, and that one of you said it, that we're learning how to adapt and provide the information and the services and the supports in spite of this new setting that's challenging for some of us. So for me, it's keep doing what you're doing and to reach out to ASCA, to ACTE, to your state associations, to your colleagues. I think this situation is forcing us to collaborate in just so much more than we were doing, and in such a different way. And that's been one of the gifts from this experience. It really has given me a lot of excitement around the work that's going on. So my hat's off to all of you.
Yeah, ditto. I continue to be blown away at what I hear about all of you are doing. Julia, do you have any advice?
Advice, I guess the number one thing that's been helpful for me is remembering the conjunction and, not but. So holding that, learning how to hold, yes, we need to send out Google Forms and access every family, and we need to breathe. and we have to put the oxygen mask on us first. Remembering to and, not but, in these times will be paramount for us to be able to continue on in the level of in the depth of this work that we're going to need, because this is, as we said, it's going to be an ongoing process. This Apollo 13, we're going to be on here for a while, so it's learning how to maintain that throughout this is going to be critical.
Absolutely. Laura?
So for me, I think it's thinking about, like, when you're building your program, your school counseling program or whatever program that you're working on, and we always talk about you can't do it all in 1 year or one space. So I think the same thing applies here. We can't do it all now. We're not going to be able to implement every single piece of our program and make it work. And so I think it's just giving ourselves some grace of, this is what I've done and this is great and I'm connecting with students, and maybe next week I try something else, or in 2 weeks I build on that. But just knowing that you're not going to be doing it all right now, and that's okay. As long as we're still reaching and teaching our students in some capacity, I think that's really the goal, is connecting with them in that way.
Excellent point. And Julie, we'll close with you.
So I would say a couple things. First, just, really use those resources. I've been blown away to, if you're, whatever your social media platform of preference is, there are so many groups and so many colleagues out there just ready to share their stuff. It's done, it's ready, take it, use it, help your students. So, take advantage of that and appreciate everybody who's eager to share their work. And then just kind of echoing what Laura said is, giving yourself some grace. We're all so passionate about the work that we do and our role with students that sometimes we struggle with the idea of it not looking perfect. And it's like when I, talk to my kids about career aptitudes and I ask them to write their name with their non-dominant hand. They can do the task, but it may not be as pretty and it may take a little bit longer. And that's kind of the animal that we're all dealing with right now with the whole notion of virtual instruction. So it's like using our non-dominant hand. And we just have to give ourselves some grace and know that we're all doing the best we can with the tools that we have.
Great. Yes, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your busy day to join us. I appreciate everyone that spoke up and interjected or asked a question in the chat. And I see somebody just said we can access everyone's email in the report section. If for some reason this was forwarded to you by a friend and you don't get ACTE or ASCA emails, please put your name in there and we will be working really hard to get all of this out to you just in the coming days. But again, hats off to all that you're doing. As always, school counselors and career development specialists are true leaders in this field and have just stepped up to ensure that students and families don't miss a beat. So thank you for all that you do, and please let us know how we can continue to support you in your work. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.